Hello, my name is Kathy, and today I'm going to talk about life crises and how to handle them. Everybody at some point or another goes through a life crisis, and it can feel like your world is ending. The first major life crisis to happen to me in my life came when I was 20 years old, on the heels of several hard life blows that hit me one after the other in quick succession, culminating in the conclusion of a relationship and a house fire where I lost everything but the clothes on my back. I had nowhere to go after my home burned to the ground and ended up having to move back into my parents' house. My mother was not pleased with this turn of events and told me that I could stay, but that I had to pay her room and board in advance for each week that I stayed in my parents' house. This took half of all the money I had in the world. 3 hours later, my mother picked up a stack of dinner plates and smashed them to pieces on the kitchen floor and threw me out of the house. It was dark and it was raining and I had no money, no job, no vehicle, no place to live, just the clothes on my back and nowhere to go, and it was cold, dark, and raining. I felt like the entire world was collapsing around me. The only place I could think of to go was the parents of an old girlfriend who lived down the street. I was in hysterics when I knocked on the door, so scared my legs could hardly hold me up from the shaking with fear I was going through. They let me in and I explained my situation, and my girlfriend's father gave me some of the most important advice I've ever received in my life, which I'm going to share with you. He told me of a crisis situation that he had gone through in the early days of his marriage. He had lost his job and had a wife and young baby to support, and the only work he could find at the time was as a cab driver, which did not pay nearly enough to live on. He told me how he got through the time was to imagine the worst thing that could happen in that particular scenario and then work through it. Step by step, creating a plan to handle the worst-case scenario. After this, he went through every other scenario for this crisis situation and worked out a whole series of solutions in his mind. When he had done all of this mental work, he felt like he could handle anything that was in front of him with confidence. Let's examine the dynamic of a crisis situation in depth. What happens in a crisis is that some awful event or series of events happens all of a sudden in your life, and it feels like you've been hit over the head by a 2x4. You often feel like you're going to physically collapse in such situations, and you experience a mind-numbing amount of formless fear. This fear that you feel resembles Mount Everest in its dimensions, and you can't process anything because all there is this mountain of intense fear that is surrounding you. The key to crisis management is to get through this intense mountain of fear that is surrounding you, and you do this with your mind. You face this fear head on. You sit yourself down with a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, and you consciously think of the very worst thing that could happen to you as a result of your crisis situation. Really get into it and intellectually face your worst fear concerning your crisis. Once you have identified the very worst of it, then you consciously think through various solutions to this state of heightened emotions. You will be amazed at the highly creative solutions you'll come up with. It really is astounding. Don't discard anything that comes into your mind for a solution to the worst-case scenario. Write it all down, because your solution is in there. Then you follow this same procedure for lesser worst-case scenarios for your particular crisis situation, until you have intellectually worked through every possible outcome imaginable. When you have completed this facing of your worst fears, you'll find that the Mount Everest of fear that was surrounding you is quite manageable, and now you have a whole page or series of pages of solutions that you can do to help yourself handle this life crisis that hit you. I followed my friend's father's advice. I did this work and found my solutions and started a whole new chapter of my life. This will happen for you as well. When we go through rough patches in our lives, we have a tendency to think that it is never going to end, that the sun will never shine again, because the crisis you are living through is so overwhelming. I am telling you, though, that as bad as your crisis situation may seem at the moment, you will find that the good times that follow it are in equal measure to the crisis situation's depths of despair. Life is a cycle. There are times, up times and down times. It's never just one way. It is never totally up and it is never totally down. You will find that the ups and down times pretty much equal out in the long run. Another thing that can happen to you when you go through an intense crisis situation is that you can become consumed with thoughts of seeking vengeance against the perpetrator of your crisis situation. Oftentimes, so many things happen all at once that you end up focusing on one manageable thing to hate and want to seek vengeance upon, when in actual fact, the crisis situation is emanating from multiple directions all at once. I know it's difficult, but it is important to your health and well-being to let it go and to flow with life's up and downs. I know that this is easier said than done, especially if your crisis situation seems to emanate from one person or entity. But if you do not let it go and move on with your life, you will attract more and more crisis situations. It's the law of attraction at work here. What you focus on the most will manifest into your life. So it is to your advantage, yours, to let it go and move on, or you will attract more of the same back into your life again. And I know you don't want that. Some tips on learning how to let really awful things go, or really nasty people in your life go, is to remember the law of karma. I'm not just saying this as a platitude here. I am serious. There is a law of karma. What you do comes back to you. Remember this when you think that the person or entity that has done you wrong is getting away with destroying your life, when it feels really, really hard to just let it go. Remember that what you have done is going to come back to them. You don't have to do a thing. It may happen quickly. It may take a while. No matter, it will come back. I also know that a lot of you may be thinking that you really want and need some hands-on personal involvement with it coming back to the perpetrator of your crisis event. But you really don't. The best vengeance is always won by you moving on to live your life in happiness and joy. I have always found that a crisis situation happens in my life because I need some dramatic life change, and it could not happen for me in any other way. Upon reflection, you will find this to be true in your life as well. You might not be able to see this right away, but when you think back on past major crisis times in your life, you'll see that they were the catalyst for major course corrections for your life path. Another thing to understand about crisis events that occur in your life: life never gives you more than you are capable of handling. You may have trouble seeing this when you are on the thick of some intense crisis situation, but when you get a chance to reflect back upon that crisis, you will see that you could and did handle what came up. There's another thing to remember. No matter what, life marches forward, and you will move through your crisis situation and end up on the other side of it, come what may. There are definite life cycles in life, and this is why the subject of astrology is so important to learn and understand. It teaches you these life cycles and how best to move forward through them. This is the reason I wrote my astrology book and why I am teaching it online for free to whoever wants it. And one last piece of advice for crisis management. When I first moved off into deep bush country in my late teens, I roomed and boarded with an elderly couple. The old man gave me some sage advice concerning life, which is absolute simplicity and truth. He told me that the only thing you have to do in this life is to die. That is it. All else that happens in your life happens because you choose it. So choose well. To stay up to date with my latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this free YouTube channel by clicking the red subscription button right below this video. Well, that's it for now. Until next time, take care.